But something I want to talk about now is something that we haven't heard a lot of so far at Great Lakes Week, and that's aquatic invasive species. And joining me now to do that is Nate Dragg. He's the Watershed Project Coordinator with Alliance for the Great Lakes. Nate, it's good to see you.
Thanks, Christy. Thanks for having me.
And also Lee Willbanks is here with the Upper St. Lawrence Riverkeeper. And so thanks so much for being here with us,
Thank you very
Lee.
much.
All right, so let's jump into this. It feels like people have taken a step back from aquatic invasive species this year when we talk about the health of the lakes. Nate, why do you think that is?
I think we heard a lot about Asian carp in the Chicago area waterway system for a while, and kind of keeping that back door of the Great Lakes closed from invasions coming in and both going out. And that was really the focus for a while. But it's important that we want to talk about that back door, urgent need there, keep the Asian carp out. But we have a front door, we have side doors to our Great Lakes house. So we have a lot of potential pathways for invasives to come in, and we want to keep all of those pathways on the level of awareness that we had for the Chicago area waterway system.
Lee, what about you? What are your thoughts in terms of where, I guess, the public interest is in terms of aquatic invasive species right now at the Great Lakes?
I am with Nate. I think the focus being on Asian carp as strongly as it has sort of diminished the attention on the other pathways. We're on the St. Lawrence River, and that's been the front door for pretty much since the seaway was opened in 1959. There have been measures that have reduced the likelihood of invasive species coming through, and I think for a lot of agencies and the public, that's caused them to sort of think maybe the issue is solved through that pathway. We're finding out now it's probably not. So one of the reasons why we did the panel and we're talking about this is to try to bring the issue up and back into awareness.
Okay, so if people think that you've solved the problem from your end of it, and you probably have not, what are some of the concerns that you have? Are we still talking ballast water?
We are still talking ballast water, but we're also talking about the trade in live species. We're talking about the fact that the EPA, when it issued final general vessel permit rules, took strong measures for the Great Lakes, but then exempted other freshwater bodies like the Mississippi River, which, because of the Asian carp story, we know is another vector for invasion. So we think we need to try to regularize what we're doing on a national basis, even though the intensity has been in the Great Lakes.
And you said, Nate, a lot of the focus has been on the Chicago area waterway system, and ever since the study came out from the Army Corps of Engineers that they were going to be looking at all various different aspects of how to solve this, and I'm not really quite sure that you can actually solve that with a period at the end of the sentence. And that separation doesn't seem to be the funding there or the political will for that to happen. What are we looking at now?
Yeah, and we don't want to take attention away from that issue. It's a serious issue, but we want to kind of keep that conversation going and carry the momentum even beyond the Great Lakes too. So this is a conversation that we want to have with the Mississippi. We want to think about other canals. There is ongoing conversations about physical separation, the realities of it. Studies from the Great Lakes Commission and the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative have looked at it. The Army Corps obviously did their study. So there's a lot of work going on to keep that momentum going.
All right, and when we talk about, I also want to expand the conversation when we talk about aquatic invasive species beyond Asian carp, because it always feels like we should be looking about 5 to 10 years down the road at what could be coming and possibly infiltrating the Great Lakes system. What do you think, Lee? What are we looking at now?
Well, it's interesting. There's a new branch of study has opened as some of the scientific archives in Eastern Europe have opened up. And we've crossed the language barrier. We've discovered that there are at least 8 species of fish that can probably survive what's currently the state of the art, which is a ballast water flush mid-ocean, because they can survive in brackish water and have a high salinity tolerance. So there's 8 species that scientists are putting at a medium to high risk, and there's probably another 30. So that's a new area that's sort of opened up, and people are suddenly beginning to talk about that. But we also still have people buying exotic pets from all over the world with no regulation at all. You can just bring about anything in. And we certainly don't want to turn the Great Lakes into what South Florida now looks like in the Everglades.
Seriously, when you're done with your exotic pet, people are just letting it go. And I think in the Great Lakes, and they think, well, if it's a body of water, well, there won't be a problem. Yeah, and then you do get what's happening down in the Florida Everglades in terms of snakes and whatnot. So, so that really is actually a problem that we should be considering.
Sure, yeah. The only legislation on that, the Lacey Act, is over 100 years old. So that's something that we really need to address. Think about the trade in pets and foreign species 100 years ago compared to now. The process, the way it stands right now, takes a long time to get on that list of banned species that you're allowed to trade and buy on the internet or anywhere. So there's works to update that, but that's a real need right now.
And Lee, you bring up a really good point in terms of talking about shipping and ballast water and the need to still have commerce through the Great Lakes and leading out to the seaway, because you have business that's their livelihood, and this is how people get it done, but still walking that fine line of being able to work with organizations and saying, hey, you need to be able to do business, but we need to be able to consider the health of the Great Lakes as well.
Well, and part of that is realizing the total cost of that commerce and how it plays out against the total risk. We've never taken a position that you should stop commerce on the Great Lakes, but when you look at the total amount of international commerce on the Great Lakes, it's pretty minuscule compared to the rest of the country. Not saying that you shut the door specifically, but if you begin to factor in what's the cost of quagga mussels and zebras, what that's done to water intakes and outfalls, hundreds of millions of dollars of cost of municipalities. It's not being borne by the shippers or the cargo, it's being borne by the people who are the subject of the invasion. And we see the algal blooms that you've talked about already, probably exacerbated because of the invasive species that came in. So the costs typically are much bigger than what we usually take into account when we do a cost-benefit analysis. And so we like to shift the discussion a little bit and broaden it out.
So Nate, I'm going to give you the last word on this one, and I want you to give us an idea. If you could have people focus, the general public focus on, in terms of aquatic invasive species in the next year or so, where would you like people to start to put their attention towards?
I know
that's a large.
That's my last thought, huh?
Yeah.
No,
in 10 seconds. No,
and go. I'd want people to think that it doesn't happen in isolation. So bodies of water are connected. So the Erie Canal connects to the Great Lakes to the East Coast. The Mississippi River connects the Gulf of Mexico to the Great Lakes. So this is a conversation that we all need to have together. And those man-made connections, maybe that's not the way nature intended it. So we're leaving ourselves vulnerable by allowing that to go on unchecked.
Okay, Nate Dragg and Lee Willbanks, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.